Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Jer.
Hello.
And a Wheeler.
Yoo-hoo.
A reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part 2 of our Kaldheim set review. A reminder for our set reviews, these are not exhaustive. We do not talk about every single card, only the ones that we think are relevant to our format, Canadian Highlander. Last episode, we covered white and blue. Today, we cover red, black, and lands, and I don't think we have much else to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. First card today is the Burning Rune Demon. 6 mana Demon Berserker. For 4 black, gets you a 6/6 with flying, and says, when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon that also have different names. If you do, reveal those cards. An opponent chooses one, put the chosen card into your hand, the other into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. What do you think, Jer?
This card's really cool. It has a really powerful effect that I'm sure has some like combo or combo adjacent applications, but I just want to play this as a fair card in survival recurring nightmare decks mostly.
What do you prefer, this or Runescarred Demon? So Runescarred Demon is what, a 7 mana 5/5 and demonic tutors, and then this gives you
This is much better in the decks that I want to play it in.
They're both 6/6s, but this one's cheaper. And
tutors you 2 cards instead of 1.
yeah, like that. If you do this properly, this card's actually just, it's like Runescarred Demon, but cheaper and fine and tutors for 2 cards.
Yeah, because much like Gifts package, you win either way, right?
Your graveyard is a resource. Yeah.
Oh, or just like you could set up things with it super easily, doubling, like even just like, I guess, Dance of the Dead and Animate Dead, right? Like you can, there's redundancy.
I win
to always get what you want. Underworld Breach is a card that exists.
Yeah, that's immediately where my combo/combo adjacent mind went to. I was like, I bet you could set up some pretty easy breach wins with this card.
Yeah, it's real easy to just deck yourself with this card, or just set up fair dredge stuff, Hogak plus God knows what. But
sorry, did you just say fair dredge?
Well, the fair side of dredge.
I don't know. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Just like value.
Yeah.
Like anger plus this, or like, and that, like, that's a bad combo. But in the way that it'll still kill people. Like you'll discard your angry baby some way. But, yeah. This card's absurd. This card,
Yeah, I think it's very good.
All right. Next up, Draugr Necromancer is a 4/4 for 4 snow zombie cleric for 3 and a black, and reads, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them. And you may spend mana from snow sources, so snow sources specifically, as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. Jer.
This card is also quite good. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead is already good and valuable text that has proven its worth in our format. And then also just getting to cast all the things you kill means you're never ever losing a fair game where this card stays in play for any reasonable amount of time. And it's got 4 toughness, so it's probably going to stay in play for a reasonable amount of time.
Do you have a home in mind when you look at that card?
I think you could just play it in like basically any mid-range deck where you play Kalitas. Basically, I think it does a similar thing. It doesn't quite stabilize as hard against the red decks, but it's better in a lot of the other matchups. So like I think it could do similar things, except it's also easier to cast, so it's easier to play in 3-color decks, and you can also just play them both.
It does have a very important creature type as well.
Cleric, you're right, Ben.
Snow?
Zombie, baby. Zombie. Yeah.
And it's also not legendary.
That's very cool. I like that. All right, let's move on to our first god of the day, the god of death, Egon. Egon?
Egon.
Egon.
Think Ghostbusters.
Oh, 3 mana 6/6 legendary god for 2 and a black has Death Touch and says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you can't, sacrifice Egon and draw a card. And on the other side, for a single black mana, you get the Throne of Death, which is a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. 2 and a black, tap, exile a creature card from your graveyard. You may draw a card. Wheeler, what do you think of Egon?
Well, it has the best name of the set twice. It wins it twice. God of Death and Throne of Death. It's so like alpha beta unlimited naming convention. And then the card is fine, I guess. Like, it's not the discussion that I've seen surrounding this card, people keep bringing up Rotting Regisaur. It's not Rotting Regisaur, not even close. Exiling 2 cards from your graveyard is like a real cost. Like, that's a lot. That's an absurd amount of cards to exile every single turn on a body that doesn't have trample and can get Caracased if you really want. Like, I guess if you muck yourself and have to draw a card, that's nice. But I think this card does do just enough on both sides that if, say, you are playing a mono black deck, could be like a Dredge-ish style deck or a black green, kind of like using your graveyard, you can play this. Like, it does have enough upsides and provides enough utility that this card is a reasonable inclusion.
We've been talking about green-black elves recently, and the possibility of that as an archetype expanding. Here's a new card potentially for that deck. Elder Fang Ritualist is a 3 mana 3/1 elf cleric for 2 and a black. When it dies, return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. Does this card have a home, Wheeler?
Well, thank you, Serge. But first, I want to clear any allegations that I am a time traveler for when I mentioned Elf Dredge before Kaldheim previews were rolling out. This was a welcome surprise to get all of these. I do believe that this is one of the cards that could fit into that deck, mostly because you can do some like circus music cycling between this card and I guess like Wirewood Herald lets you set up some weird stuff. There's a bunch of like Wirewood Herald's a 2-drop elf. It's 1 and a green. It's a 1/1. When it dies, 2 to your deck for an elf, right? So it's just like you can start the chain really quickly where you have a thing that dies to find this, and then this dies, and you get back the elf, and you tutor out a different elf that ideally brings back more elves, and because it's elves, you have a buttload of mana, or you have ways of, you have a bunch of creatures to sacrifice, 2 things to give you buttloads of mana. So I guess my answer is yes. And also because elves and elf dredge, like black as your supporting color, is kind of solidified because now you have the redundancy to just Shaman of the Pack your opponent into oblivion. Like you can kill them by like Craterhoof stuff or just drain them for 10 twice or 6 3 times or whatever.
Or 20 once.
Yeah. Card's good. Card's really good.
Cool.
Also 1 black pip.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge.
Not bad for a splash. All right, next up, Eradicator Valkyrie is a 4 mana 4/3 Angel Berserker for 2 black. Has flying, lifelink, and hexproof from Planeswalkers. Also has a boast ability, 1 and a black, sack a creature. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or Planeswalker. JR, what do you think?
I think all the text on this card is good except for one thing. That's the 3 toughness. Otherwise, this card pretty much has it all. I mean, it goes in a long line of things that are overcosted that die to lightning bolt, and I know it's a tired trope, but people play lightning bolt, people play chain lightning. They keep printing more and more playable 2 mana / maybe sometimes cheaper deal 3 damage to things. And it's going to die a bunch of times for low cost, but if you get to untap with it and it gets to do its thing, it's going to be really good. So
notably not legendary, which gives it a little bit more protection.
Yeah, and the hexproof from Planeswalkers is cool, and they should retroactively put that text on like randomly on half the creatures from Magic, and it would be a better game. But, I like to see the text. It's a cool card. Like, if it gets to do its thing, it's sweet in a bunch of different decks. Making people sack Planeswalkers is, good.
Feels good.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we got Poison the Cup, 3 mana instant for 1 black, destroy target creature. But it also foretells for 1 and a black, and if this spell was foretold, scry 2. What do you think, Jer?
I love it. This is a card where you don't really mind paying 3 for it, like as long as there's an upside, and there is an upside. And in black decks, black is often a deck that doesn't have a ton of early plays, so you can often take a turn off because you've like killed all their useful things, and they just have an elf left in play that you don't care about because you're going to kill the big things that the elf is going to power out. And this lets you do that with a bit of value attached later on, or if you really need to kill something now, you can do it right away. So yeah, I like this card quite a bit.
All right, next up we have another sorcery here. Raise the Draugrs.
Ooh, instant Surge.
Oh my goodness, it's an instant?
Yeah, that's
Whoa,
kind of
I've been playing this card as a sorcery.
Oh,
I just assumed it was a sorcery. This card's way better. Sorry, let me finish it.
Yeah.
Yeah, raise the Draugr, 1 and a black instant, choose one, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, that's way better than I thought. Wheeler, what do you think?
Yeah. So there was a card that is basically, there's basically a card like this that was printed in Modern Horizons called Return from Extinction, which is this card, except it's a sorcery. I'm a sucker for a good Raise Dead. I'm sure a lot of other people are also big fans. But any 2 mana return 2 cards in black, pretty okay. I guess we have like zombies and whatnot, or maybe clerics in that line. But now that we have since that card came out, the one in Horizons, this card we got, because of Raise the Draugr, we have 2 copies now. This one's even better because it's instant speed. That's absurd. And we've just received better cards along the way to reinforce, again, tribal synergies in this deck. Cards like Village Rights, which is just okay, cool, thanks. Better sack outlets, a bunch of little things. And so now that we've had so many quality of life updates, I think you could play a tribal deck in black with 2 copies of this effect, and you'll be happy to do so.
All right.
Yes.
Next up, Rise of the Dreadmarn. 3 mana instant for 2 and a black. Create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. Or foretells and cast for a single X. JR, what do you think?
Single black.
What did I say?
Single X.
Oh, yeah, single black on the foretell. Thank you. Nice catch.
Yeah, this card harkens back to Caller of the Claw and numerous other things that do something similar. This lets you split up the cost into 2 and then 1 later, and also lets you sort of disguise it sitting away. And that's part of the fun of the foretell cards, is you get to foretell something, and then your opponent has to try to it's going to get in their head until you cast it. So this is one of the big payoff ones. And it also makes zombies, which has been mentioned as often relevant creature type, and especially I was thinking in the zombie aristocrats deck could be a really powerful effect if you can sack a bunch of zombies and then make a bunch more zombies and then sack a bunch of zombies. Yeah, you get the picture.
All right, next up, Skemfar Avenger. It's a 3/1 elf berserker for 1 and a black. Whenever another non-token elf or berserker you control dies, draw a card and lose a life. Wheeler.
It's a 2 mana in the elf deck, I should say. I guess technically a berserker deck, but we're a couple of cards away from that. In an elf deck, it's a 2 mana Midnight Reaper style of card. Something dies, you draw a card, don't care about losing life, and it's an elf, which is good. And it's got 3, it's just a fine card too. Midnight Reaper and Grim Haruspex in aristocrats decks, they do it they can attack. Those things can kill planeswalkers and attacking for 3. And this one gets to do it starting on turn 2. 1 toughness is a bit of a, everything can chump block this or trade with this rather, but that's fine. If this isn't attacking, that's okay. It's still just relevant for what you're looking to do.
And notably, unlike Midnight Reaper, it doesn't trigger off itself.
Yes.
Which is a little bit of a downside.
Yeah. And non-token is a bit but that's okay. As per the previous kind of elf Benny Hill theme shenanigans, you are not running low on non-token elves to kill.
Yeah, you're getting enough value as it is. You're look, even with these downsides, still like it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right, here's another Skemfar card, and I'm a little bit more on the fence about this one, but we should talk about it anyways because it's a elf in black. Skemfar Shadow Sage is a 4 mana 2/5 for 3 and a black elf cleric. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control, the creature type in common, or you gain X for the same clause. Notably, not a drain. You either gain or they lose. What do you think, Wheeler?
I mean, I'm hoping when I play this, they lose. The game, that is. Just, yeah, hey, how you doing? Yeah, this is just redundancy in, again, like the Shaman of the Pack kind of kill spell in that both this card and, for those not familiar, Shaman of the Pack, it's a 3-mana 3/2 elf that when it ETBs, they lose life equal to the number of elves your opponent does. And this doesn't technically say elves, but it might as well just say elves. And so, yeah, it's redundancy on a easy way to just kill your opponent, drain them out. And again, for whatever reason, it's a single black pip. So that's the biggest limiter for like these new elf cards in being black-green, is that, you know, you are mostly green. All your elves are probably just adding green, and your Gaia's Cradle adds green. So you need to make sure that you're not adding too many double black pips. And this is just super easy to get down and kill people.
Yeah, I actually think this card is like more of a slam dunk in the elves deck than even the last one, maybe. Like it's this card is nuts in that deck. Like if you get to cast this against mono red, they probably just lose.
For sure. And that's like the Skemfar Avenger is like a good card that does what you want, but has some downsides. And like one of those being that it has 1 toughness, and it does a thing that elves doesn't necessarily need extras of. But like this, like you'll take as many of this style card, the Shadow Sage, as you can get. And like Jer said, you know, if your burn opponent or whatever is like, you know what, I don't have enough fork bolts in the world to stop their creatures, so I'm just going to try and kill them with actual factual burn. Gaining a bunch of life and having a 2/5?
Yeah, it's their worst nightmare. It's practically Thragtusk Finks.
This is literally 3 Siege Rhinos.
I just like people trying to follow along at home and be like, okay, it's a fast format. Turn 1, turn 3, 4 drops have to be bombs. 4 mana 2/5. Woohoo!
This is a bomb though. That's what they need to understand.
Yeah.
Like,
and Canlander's a fast format, but it's the same thing with like the common misconception for formats like Vintage or like Cubes, where it's just like, oh, everybody's dying on turn 3 and Black Lotus and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, no, because you have these cards and your opponent also has these cards. So if you just have like a Monastery Mentor and a Tarmogoyf sitting around like, I can't kill you. Well, I can't kill you. Cool. And they just kind of look at each other.
Stare at each other for a while. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's move on to another god. We're going to talk about Turgrid, God of Fright. This is a 5 mana 4/5 god with menace for 3 black. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And then it has another side too, inexplicably. We have their Lantern, which is a 4 mana legendary artifact for 3 and a black. Tap. Target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. And for 3 and a black, you can untap it. What do you think, team? This is obviously a very powerful effect, but at 5 mana, who wants it?
this one I just think is a little too Clunksville on both sides. It's really sweet and cool.
I'm going to cast this stupid lantern off of Mishra's Workshop. And mostly because I'm playing like Canlander Lantern Control. And that'll be funny to me, and some kind of reprieve of going like 0-2-1. But like the front side of this card doesn't, it like the scariest part is that it has menace. Right? Like it's got a bunch of toughness and 4 power and menace, because like it just requires so much. So I'd probably not save this card for like making your commander group hate you.
But like a lot of people are going to point out, but North 100 crew, you get fetch lands for free. Just think of all the value, all the incidental things that get sacrificed or discarded in a game of Magic.
Let me talk to you about Opposition Agent. Like
and also just like generally how people sequence lands in the format. They're already afraid of Avid Mind Sensor and now Opposition Agents. So there's even more reason to play the fetch lands in your opening hand early, and they're going to fetch any lands they have in play in response to this. Then you maybe get an extra land after you already have 5 mana.
It's a 5 mana value disruptive creature that is a rare in black. And Jer is not excited. That you probably shouldn't play it.
Although I will note that it does beat Birth and Pod combo.
Oh, yeah.
It disrupts their chains.
Oh, it just hoses pod.
Maybe I will play. Oh, now hold on. Oh, this card's really good with Cataclysm.
Wait, does it disrupt it? No, you just get the pod chain afterwards.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah, almost all the pod chains are recursive.
They sacrifice their Pestermite and you tap down their birthing pod and there's nothing they can do about it.
All right, let's move on then. Next up, we have Valky, God of Lies. 2 mana, 2/1 for 1 and a black. When they enter the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valky leaves the battlefield. Activated ability X, choose a creature card exiled with Valky. With converted mana cost of X, Valky becomes a copy of that card. Now, notably, Valky loses the ability to copy anything again. So Valky is now permanently that card. And on the other side, surprise! Tibalt is back. Tibalt, the Cosmic Imposter, is a 7 mana planeswalker for 5 black red, enters play with 5 loyalty. As it enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with you may play cards exiled with Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. +2, exile the top card of each player's library. -3, exile target artifact or creature. -8, exile all cards from all graveyards and add 3 red pips. Team, what do you think?
I think this card's quite good. But
Pretty good.
like the front half, very good. The back half, very good. One's a good early gameplay, one's an insane late gameplay.
What deck wants this?
Mid-range decks, control decks, aggro decks.
Yeah.
Basically everything except combo.
It's not like a super, like, it's not a busted in half, like, oh, disgusting, unbelievable sort of card. It's just everything is really good about it, you know? And like even the cheesy stuff, like the cascading, if you play a Bloodbraid Elf and you hit this, you can cast the Tibalt side, I believe. I believe that's the
I think that's how it works, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen modern Jund do that, which don't ask me why I watched somebody play Jund in modern, but yeah, I mean, like you could just have the front half of this card and that's like totally fine. Like it's all right. You can do some funny things with that X spell as well, or with the copying, like you might hit their Uro or, you know, a Croxa or whatever, and you're like, oopsie doopsie.
I'm pretty sure people are just like dreaming of hitting Uro. Like as soon as they saw the card, they're like,
All right, do this on 2, turn 3, hit them with your Uro, draw a card, gain a life, play a land. You're like, take that, blue-green.
But it even doesn't even have to like be Uro to be super absurd, right? Like it can just, I mean, even just mucking like a Trinket Mage against combo or a Baral or whatever, like that is really annoying. And it's got 2 power. Like that's a real amount of power
for 2 mana. Yeah. It's like,
yeah, I'm excited to unearth this card. Like I will this is the kind of card where I'm like, yeah, I could cast unearth targeting this.
I'm excited to actually kill people with Tibalt.
Yeah, that feels great. That having tried it out, it feels great.
And boy, if you think I like 5 mana spells, wait till you see me cast 7 mana spells.
I mean, Tibalt's 7, Valky's 2. That's basically 5, right?
Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah,
Math checks out.
Wow, what a coincidence. Next up, Varagoth Blood Sky Sire is a legendary demon rogue 2/3 for 2 and a black, has Death Touch and a boast ability for 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, shuffles their library, and puts that card on top of it. Jer, what do you think?
This card is very good. Yep, it is very good. It attacks well. It has a mana cost that makes it easily added into any deck that also attacks well. And casting a reasonably costed Vampiric Tutor is pretty nice. Gonna be useful. Like against combo decks, it lets you get your disruption / hand attack / whatever you need / faster clock burn spell to kill them. Against other decks, it just lets you get like make sure you're drawing gas every turn and like you're drawing the best card in your deck every turn. That's what this card lets you do. For 2 mana, you get to draw the best card in your deck every turn.
Yeah, like what's your dream top deck Well, there it is. Dreams come true.
And because of the 3 toughness, it means it's very hard to chump block. Like the decks that are chump blocking rarely get to rarely have 3 power creatures to chump block with. It means you're like trading with like a Vendilion Clique or a Nimble Obstructionist or something, which isn't the worst. And that's like their best case scenario.
It's got a Gaunty body. Gaunty body is like excessively annoying. Like, it's one of those things where, you know, we talk about, and Gaunty's got an ETB, but it still just stands where, like, we'll talk about how, like Jared mentioned with Eradicator Valkyrie, and like, oh, you know, you can bolt it and you can bolt this, but 2/3 Death Touch is just so annoying. It's you gotta play against it to be like, oh, I never have good attacks ever.
It's funny because it's not threatening enough that you don't see it as a threat. You just see it as an annoyance. A 4/3, you're like, oh yeah, I'll bolt that. You see this 2/3, you're like, do I have to bolt this?
And you do immediately. And if they play it while you're tapped out and they get to attack and draw the best card in their deck next turn, you're like, I don't really want to bolt it now. They already got their value, but then they're going to do it again next turn.
I wonder if this set will make Orcland Rampager worse. Like, if people will, if like this, they'll get Varagoth like twice and they're like, gotta kill it at beginning of combat now.
It wasn't ninjutsu. It wasn't Blood Rush. It's going to be Boast that finally gets people to cast their spells in the right phase.
Not Rabble Master, not Ember Cleave. They needed to keyword it so people would ask, and they're like, oh, got it.
Stop playing your instance on their turn.
Just kill it. You won't look smarter if you try to do it in combat, and then they still get to vamp.
Yep. Then you get absolutely rinsed by the card they draw next turn.
So the final card we're going to talk about today for black is Way Down. It's a sorcery, costs a single black pip, and as an additional cost to cast a spell, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Target creature gets -3/-3. Wheeler, what do you think?
I'm here to tell you that I don't like this card that much. Mostly, like, I don't think it's the worst. I want to say I will play this in some decks. The fact that it's 1 mana, pretty cool. The fact that it's a sorcery, not as cool. And this card is going to feel so bad when you don't have the creature to exile, right? And like, if you are a black deck that is going to be playing enough creatures to justify having a card this cheap and this like looking to push through damage, chances are a lot of your creatures are going to want to come back. They're going to be, you know, recursive threats or like Gutter Bones style stuff, Dread Wanderer, Bloodghast. You don't want to exile those things.
Or you're going to have like the plethora of unearth and unearth effects in your deck.
Yeah. And like, your opponent's going to want to already exile all your creatures with Scoos and Death Rate and stuff. And so it's just like such an awkward card to have when you can't cast it. And even when you can cast it, you might just be kind of like hitting, like you're kind of hemorrhaging yourself in the sense that you are actively working against the reason to play that kind of deck. Like, to play an aggressive black or black X deck is the recursion and the resiliency.
The issue with this card is there are a number of cards that black does that are good, that are similar to this. You know, Disfigure, you know, very quick, very cheap removal, dead weight. What is the 1 mana black instant target creature gets -X/-X, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard?
Beg your pardon?
Did I make that up?
Yeah.
I thought there was a spell like that.
I think it's creature cards in your graveyard.
1 mana, give -X/-X for creature cards in your graveyard?
I thought so. I thought it was like an Alex classic.
There's like Thirst for Blood, which is gaining life. But no. I don't think
maybe it's black-green, -X/-X for creatures in your graveyard.
There's Drown in Filth, which kind of does that.
Maybe it's that.
There's
Ulcerate, which is lose 3.
No, it's not Drown in Faith. All right, whatever. This card doesn't exist. Anyways, what I was trying to echo before, you know what? Somebody in the comments is gonna validate me and they'll be like, Serge is a genius. Probably not, actually. Probably just misremembering 2 cards and smushing them together. Yeah, this card sounds like the type of card that you want to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I called them water cooler cards, where it's kind of just like you'd look at them like, you see that new removal spell? And oh yeah, cheap 1 mana removal spell in black, but not bad. Yep. Okay, see ya. Like but you won't ever play it, right?
Right.
Like you'll talk about how it does things you want, but why would you play this over Dismember or Eliminate or like any of these other cards? It's just awkward. Your removal spells need to be like Vendetta, right? That's why Vendetta is still just like a reasonable card for aggressive black decks. Is that like, yeah, I'll pay 1 mana and take 80 damage. That's okay though, because it always kills, right? It's always killing. Whereas this one is not as much. Were you talking about Tragic Slip, Serge?
No, I wasn't talking about Tragic Slip. It's fine. Let's just move on with our lives. That card, yeah. All right. Our first red card we're going to talk about today is Arnie, Broken Brow. Arnie is a 3-mana 3/3 legendary human berserker for 2 and a red, has haste and a boast ability. 1, you may change Arnie's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control until end of turn. Wheeler.
Serge, you had me at haste and 3 power. Serge, you had me at ancient 2 mana. Serge, I gotta tell you, you had me at the fact that this card depicts somebody that headbutt a troll and got a horn lodged into their brain, and then presumably is some sort of leader or king because of it. And they're like, yeah, I did that. Kind of messed my head up, but it was kind of fun. No, this card's great. I like this card. It's for all those reasons. It's got haste. It's got 3 power, ancient 2 mana. Its ability for 1 mana to make it slightly larger at times. Not entirely necessary, but you know what? Sometimes you got a dragon in that. Sometimes you've got like, not ball lightning, but that'd be very fun. R.I.P. ball lightning. Although, who knows? Knight's a puppy. Good with Berserk, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Always down for a double Berserk, which is appropriate as it's a Berserker. Yeah, I really like this card. Quite powerful.
So, quick question. Obviously, medium red. Is this an RDW card as well?
No, I don't think so.
You could play it in red green.
Yeah, I'm more into it for red green because, well, you play more Colossal Mites and Berserks and all that jazz.
The aforementioned Gorkline Rampager.
And 3 mana, not as bad because you might have some mana dorks or at the very least,
get it down on 2.
Yeah, double Moxen plus mana crypt.
All right, let's move on to Red God. Let's talk about Bergi, God of Storytelling. 3 mana 3/3 God for 2 and a red. Whenever you cast a spell, add red mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. And on the other side, we have Harnfeld, Horn of Bounty, 5 mana legendary artifact for 4 and a red. Discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. May the deep breathing and laughter ensue. Friends.
Why?
No laughter?
Talk about God of Storytelling. I feel like who's that old Greek dude that laughed so much he died? I feel like that happened to me when I looked, or like a mule got drunk and died. Somebody in the chat and comments will say, but I think that happened when I read this card for the first time. It's very good. Yep. I don't care if it dies to bolt. It doesn't matter. A lot of things die to bolt I'm talking about this from a combo perspective.
I think that's the only perspective you can look at this card.
Yeah.
I was going to say more like God of Stormy Telling. Am I right?
Oh, no.
Okay, so Bergi, this side of Bergi is a combo card. This is a storm card.
So I think they're both combo cards.
What about the other side?
Also combo.
Is this like a medium red or a big red deck? Does anybody want Harnfeld?
I mean, you want that in big red.
I mean, I obviously want Harnfeld. Yeah, like don't get me wrong.
You could try. This feels like the card where, like, yeah, you know what? It's probably good in like medium red, but most things are, right? Like it's like does a thing in that deck, but it's probably not the correct thing to do for that deck. Maybe there's like a blue red version. Like playing this card with Force Will backup is pretty slick.
I was gonna say this is like maybe a reason to be red and High Tide now.
Oh my.
Interesting.
I mean, it only took this card in Underworld Breach. Like it just a couple of cards, maybe playing Hull Breacher with your Wheel of Fortune that you now have too.
Isn't one of the lands a blue-red island mountain? There you go. That's arguably the biggest one.
And Wheeler, if you were curious,
huh?
Chrysippus. It's the philosopher who laughed himself to death.
Chrysippus?
Yeah.
I'm a regular Chrysippus laughing at donkeys. Actually, you know what? It's appropriate. Yeah, this card's busted in half. Who like? Yeah, it's
All right.
it's not Electromancer because it does like it's a different thing than that.
Sure.
It's better.
But
sure,
it's
sure,
so
sure.
it's so absurd. I think I went on like a half-hour tangent about this card when I first saw it.
Also, the fact that the mana doesn't go away matters a lot, and people won't realize it.
Can you give an
Yeah.
example?
Well, there's just like times when you're comboing and you like sort of do some stuff, but for some reason you want to switch phases, especially with High Tide, with like floating mana. And with this, you can like start doing it. They'll float a bunch of mana. You'll do something. You'll leave your extra red mana floating. Then you'll go to second main phase, and they have to use their mana or lose it forever.
You can kind of try and bait them with starting pre-combat and then moving through it.
Giga Drowse.
Yeah, okay.
What the heck is it called?
Turnabout.
Early Frost, Turnabout. Yeah.
Maybe even
Eggs.
Fire Ice or something like that.
Yeah. Gas
right.
card. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, this card's really good.
Yep.
So next up, we have Dragon Kin Berserker. 2-mana, 2/2 human berserker for 1 and a red. Has First Strike, which I think actually makes this card quite spicy. And then boast abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate for each dragon you control. And then the boast is 4 and a red, create a 5/5 dragon creature token with flying. And I kind of like this card. I don't know how often you're gonna play it for the boast ability and to play it for the dragon, but I think it is an early game, well costed aggressive creature. Just 2/2 for 2 with First Strike seems fantastic. It carries equipment great. It just like it slams, it jams. And late game, if you find yourself in a situation where you need a mana sink, I think that the flexibility that it offers is fantastic. I don't think you're slamming this in Dragon Tribal or anything too cute than that.
I mean, if I played Dragon Tribal, I wouldn't not slam it in Dragon Tribal.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're playing Dragon Tribal, I think, you know what? Go ahead and...
Yeah, all right, this gets in there too. I think it's more likely to say there isn't a Dragon Tribal deck.
You have enraged at least 2 people, I'm sure.
I apologize to the people in the comments who've been jamming Dragonlander this whole time, but Dragonstorm doesn't count. Dragonstorm doesn't count.
This card's definitely grown on me. It's it's a very good card. Whether or not it lines up well enough in our format is a bit of a different story. Like First Strike on a red card is always absurd. And yeah, I'm the 5 mana. Heck yeah.
It's just so hard to block.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I'll give this a shot in medium red for sure.
They just like always get to attack with it with open mana, and you're just like, well, which creature am I throwing away this time?
Yeah.
I mean, I like this in an equipment deck where you don't suit this creature up, right? It's like, well, you can block my creature carrying a Sword of Fire and Ice, or you can block the dragon that's going to make me a 5/5 each turn. Pick your poison.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also good suited. This with a Skull Clamp.
I was gonna say, you do want to suit it up. Just give it a Bone Splitter. Like then it's basically unblockable.
Choo choo.
And dump all your excess mana into making dragons because it's very much the card of like you'd play it in decks where you're going to play Mana Crypt or Ancient Tomb or some kind of acceleration, but you cap out at a lower cost and tend to play a lot of 1s and 2s because then you'll find yourself with a bunch of mana and not much to do with it.
You're describing equipment decks is basically it, right? Like low curve but high mana, which is a weird combo. But
like even like a red-white like Blood and Taxes D&T style deck. I could see that card in this.
That's what I was saying for that, because it's good in the early game, and if you happen to have a game where you have a bit of excess mana, it's a fantastic mana dump. If you don't want to overcommit to the board, right?
Yeah, for sure. This card is gross. Like having played with it, it's just like, will it find a home? If somebody says, "Hey, I found a deck to play it in. Here it is," I'll be like, "Yeah, great. Card's fantastic."
Next up, we have Frostbite. Frostbite is a snow instant for a single red pip. Deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker, so it can't go to the dome. And if you control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 instead. JR, what do you think?
I think this card is very good for control decks, aka Blue Moon. It is probably better than Chain Lightning for the most part.
Finally.
What? You can cut Chain Lightning from Blue Moon?
Yeah, finally people can. God, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but it feels so bad.
Yeah, I mean, it does sometimes let them cast their removal spells on their turn when you were going to untap with your Gorkline Rampager or Ninjutsu card. So sometimes it like tricked them into casting their spell at the right time. But
Yeah.
Woo! That's really funny.
yeah, this card's good. Goes in the control decks that were playing Snow and want another Lightning Bolt or want to cut Chain Lightning. Either or.
Let's talk about Goldspan Dragon. This is a 5-mana 4/4 dragon for 3 red, has flying and haste. And whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Wait, it also has another ability that says treasures you control have tap, sack, add 2? It just makes treasures better?
It's so unnecessary.
See, this is what I'm saying. This set is going to make people just cast everything at beginning of combat.
So unnecessary.
Why does it just make treasures better? Sorry, I read this. I'm going to be honest. I stopped reading and I just assumed the extra line was a reminder of what a treasure did. I didn't think it buffed treasure tokens. Why? Does it go in medium red, Wheeler?
What a ridiculous question.
You know, that deck of yours that likes dragons with haste and more mana.
God, it's been such a roller coaster ride. It's like the scene from Chinatown where I'm getting like slapped repeatedly, where I'm like, I want dragons. I don't want any dragons. I want dragons. And then all of a sudden 2020 and 2021 comes up with a big old haymaker of like Territorial Hellkite and Goldspan Dragon. You're like, oh, okay, never mind. I still want dragons. Sorry, Stormbreath Dragon. It was great while it lasted. Although that one dodges swords to plowshares. God, maybe I'm just playing maybe I'm playing Dragon Tribal. You know, I've always loved Dragon Tribal. I've never said a bad thing about it.
Have I ever told you about Dragon Kin Berserker? Goes great in the dragon deck.
I played a deck a while ago, like literally over a year ago, and it was kind of a meme where it was like black, red, like a bunch of dragons and reanimation spells. And the idea was you just play a dragon or like Falcon Wrath Aristocrat and you hit them. And if they kill it, you just bring it back and get to do it again. And now that deck might just be really, like, dare I say, good.
Do you just play like all the rituals and mana acceleration?
Yep. Yeah. I think my points were like mana. This is going to date it. I think they were like Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Mox, or maybe it was Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mox.
Oh yeah, the classic like 18-point fast mana spread.
Yeah, you had Dark Ritual.
You could also throw GTN for free, right?
Sure, why not? Water's great. Get on in. Yeah, I mean, realistically, that might be a fine deck, but you could put this card in whatever. Just kill people. Red, blue dragons? Sure, why not?
Green, red. Yep.
God, this is so stupid. God, I'm going to play this, attack with it, and someone's going to be like, oh, oops, I guess I'll kill it now. And you're like, okay, I get another token, and now I'm going to negate it. And then also have 2 more mana back up to pay for your days or spell pierce or just...
You get 2 mana in response. You're never tapping out. Because if they try and
They can't ever kill it if you have blue spells.
Oh my god.
And I can't stress just how good 4 power, 4 toughness, haste flying is. You could strip away all of every like line of text except for that, and it wouldn't be playable because of it, but you could still kill people. Like, that's just ends games.
All right, let's move on here. Next up, we have Magda, Brazen Outlaws, a 2-mana 2/1 legendary dwarf berserker for 1 and a red. Says other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token and sack 5 treasures. Search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. I'm going to throw this to me, and then you two can jump in later if you want to. They've been, for the past couple of sets, and maybe actually the past couple of years, time is kind of weird, have been working on sort of like a red-white dwarf tap sub-theme. They had a little bit of it in like Kaladesh for crewing vehicles, and there hasn't quite been enough density to just make that work, to make like vehicles, tapping creatures get there. But this is getting you closer. And this, I think, just by itself, just like the treasure thing, if you ignore the other, like a synergy around that and just look at the treasure thing, All right, sorry. I talked about it from like a vehicle point of view, and I think that deck is really cool. It's something I've had my eyes on. It's not quite there. What do you think of it just as a 2/1 that does things with treasures?
I'm going to let Jer go first because I'm counting dwarves. Give me a second.
I'm betting, I'm taking a stab and going to say that the number of dwarves Ben comes up with isn't going to be significant enough to make me want to play this card.
Let's take a guess. I'm going to guess there's 24 dwarves. How many dwarves do you think there are in Magic?
I mean playable Canlander dwarves.
Sorry,
not just
yeah, I
dwarves.
mean that's even better. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm looking for playable.
And like treasures aren't reliable enough to come by that you're gonna get to search up artifacts or dragons, and otherwise you're just getting a 2/1 for one.
Okay.
Not doing it for me, but
I got up to 28 dwarf cards that are playable and reasonable if we're talking like red, white, like equipment are involved. Now, let me clarify. 7 of those cards are copies of 7 dwarves. But hey, we're allowed to do that.
All right, so we're not quite there yet, eh?
I like this card. I genuinely like this card.
I do too. I think it's very cool.
But I don't care about dwarves or the like vehicle stuff. I'd kind of just like it because it's a 2 mana, 2 power creature that, it might buff like 1 or 2 cards that I have in play. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. But whenever it attacks, I get a treasure token. That's it. I like that. I don't mind that. That's it. Or even when it's tapped, because I'll play vehicles in like a red deck, Copter, you might Heart of Kieran in the right deck. Like if you get to start attacking with this card, it can absolutely win you games. You get ahead so quickly. So I don't mind this card. I don't know exactly where I'm going to play it, but I think it does enough that you could justify, not justify. Like I don't think you're like scrambling to find reasons to play it. It's weird to say, but red has a lot of really good 2-drops now.
They really do. That's where I'm as well. I want to find a home for this deck, and I think to compete with the other red 2-drops, it needs to be slightly better than just a 2/1 that gets you a little bit faster ahead on mana. That's why I'm really keeping my eye peeled on like vehicles, dwarves, because there's a couple of effects that are like, look at the top X cards for like vehicles, dwarfs, and artifacts or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's that density that I want. And if I have to play 7 copies of 7 dwarves, so be it. We'll see what happens.
I mean, at worst, they're a grizzly bear. Grizzly bears end games. And sometimes it's a Colonian Tusker. And Lord, do those ever win games.
All right. Well, I'll keep you updated. Let's move on. Next up, we have Quakebringer. Quakebringer is a 5-mana 5/4 giant berserker for 3 red. Your opponents can't gain life. Red decks love to see that. At the beginning of your upkeep, deal 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers only if Quakebringer is on the battlefield or if it's in your graveyard and you control a giant. And it also foretells for 2 red. Jared, what do you think?
I think this card is quite good at killing your opponent. All it needs to do is be in play and it will kill your opponent. It's also pretty good at attacking to kill your opponent. If you happen to have some extra mana on any of the first, or basically turn 2 or 3, you can kill your opponent faster with it, with a cost reduction ability. And there are some other playable giants, and that lets it kill your opponent from the graveyard. So yeah, if you're interested in killing your opponent, Quakebringer may be for you.
Is RDW looking to play this though?
Not RDW. I could see playing it in medium red. I don't know. Ben will probably disagree because it costs 5 and doesn't have haste.
It doesn't have haste, yeah.
No, I'd play it in thick red.
You know what? Sure, yes.
This is a legitimate. Well, I don't have a better name for it. If y'all have a better name, but I just mean that like I think for decks like that, and it's not just for the red variant. Like you can look at it for green and white, especially maybe black. But I haven't tried or looked into it. But like there are enough variations in these decks that also do different things at different speeds that you could play like a big red version without, or not big red. Well, maybe it's basically big red, but you're not playing Sundering Titans and stuff. Your air quote big is this giant 4-drop, I guess, or 5-drop. But like it's a good card.
Do you
right?
get to play Emissary of Grudges in thick red?
Oh yeah.
All right,
I mean, we
down.
played that in medium red. We're absolutely playing that in thick red. You get Shatter Skull Charger, like from Zendikar, the new one. You get, Bone Crusher Giant's just a good Magic card. Like this card's also just
yeah.
fine in like green red, right?
Hmm.
Green red, you play Giants, Crystalline Giant. You get up to that mana super quickly already. Like you're going to have extra mana if you want to foretell this, or just cast it as a 5-drop.
I do like the Tribe Matters cards when you suddenly find out a card that you're playing anyways works. Bone Crusher Giant's a perfect example. You're just like, oh yeah.
oh yeah, just like the random like, oh, this is a giant. Like, oh, I had no idea. Like those little like bits of realization, very good, very powerful. You could play Countryside Crusher.
Countryside Crusher, yeah, another great example.
Ember Swallower.
What?
I just want to play Ember Swallower. It's the monstrous.
Oh, the 4/5
Yeah.
from Theros? Oh,
yeah, I love that card.
It's an elemental. Ember Swallower is in fact not a giant. I have bad news for you.
Okay, but it survives wildfire. Also, you could lie to your opponent.
You don't lie to your opponent. No. All right, North 100 does not advocate lying to your opponent about your creature's creature type. All right, let's move on.
Unless it's Ember Swallower.
Unless it's Ember Swallower. All right. Last red card today we're going to talk about is Toralf, God of Fury. 4 mana, 5/4, not a giant. It's a god. For 2 red, has trample, and whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. And on the other side, we have their hammer. For 1 and a red, it's an equipment. Equips for a red. Equipped creature has 1 and a red, tap and untap or unattach the hammer, deal 3 damage to any target. Return the hammer to its owner's hand, and equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary, which is a little clunky. Wheeler, what do you think?
Do you have the art in front of you by chance?
Yes.
Okay, then I don't know what you're talking about, because this dude's clearly a giant. Look at the size of this lad. Holy smokes.
Gods can be large. It doesn't make them giants, Wheeler. I'm sorry.
In my mind, you know what? North 100, we support anything that's very large in the artwork as a technical giant.
It doesn't have reach.
In my mind, it does. That's what I'll tell. Hey, when I play a German copy of this, I'll tell him it has reach. Anyways, this card's very good. I'm kind of... Every time I see these 4-drops in red, I think this is what I mean when I'm saying like there's room for deviation in certain spots for these decks. Like Torbran from Eldraine, I thought would be a little too clunky until I witnessed it in front of my eyes, just slaughtering people left and right in Canlander. And then of course also just, every other format, in standard and whatnot. And so any kind of card like this that has an immediate impact on the creature side where you can play it, and then you just get to, if you got chump blocks, sorry, you're actually just dead. And that's even without it attacking. It just attacks for 5 power with trample. That's cool and good. And then the flip side, I'm a real sucker for Hammer of Bogarden, but it lets you, you can play it out as the hammer early if you really need to modify damage in a certain way or take care of any kind of pesky hate bears, like a Fauna Shaman or whatever. You're a red deck, you probably should have that, but it takes care of things. It provides reach if attacking's off the table. It also rebuys it as the creature later. And if you're talking medium red or red green, there are so many legendary creatures. Everything is basically legendary, or red white. Because legendary is used as a mediator,
like a downside or something now.
Yeah, that's kind of how they balance power on a lot of cards. It doesn't always work, because turns out 1 Omnath in play is still pretty good. And so yeah, it can be clunky. I will say that. I'm not going to say oh, it'll never come up, but it will be live more than you'd expect. But that's okay. I think this card just does enough, much like how Halvar is in that position. It does enough. It checks off enough boxes and is powerful at various stages of the game.
Now, just want to clarify, you're talking on the first half about making blocks bad. It is non-combat damage, so it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It's not just like Torbrand where you just attack and they're dead. It's fight effects. It seems to be maybe like a Planeswalker shock or burn spells, but not combat damage.
Well, their blocks are probably bad anyways.
Because you're playing against red, all their creatures are dead.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that changes it a bit, but quite a lot actually. But I still think this card's very good.
Now to the land section, and this set actually brought us quite a few very interesting lands we've had in the past couple sets. So buckle up, friends, as we jump in and explore them, starting with the Guard Armory. Now, it enters play tapped, which is a very big downside, and we'll discuss that later on and see if the effect counters it out. Tap to add white, and it has an activated ability, 1 red, red, white, tap, and sacrifice. Search your library for an aura card and or an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. To myself, because I seem to have positioned myself as the red-white equipment or aura person, I think this is fine, and I think what you're going to need to do when you look at this card, especially if you're trying to go for an aggressive deck, is look at how many lands that you're already playing that offer utility that are either tapped or that also enter the battlefield tapped, because this is a very real cost. This is a very real cost and a very real downside, and it's going to be a medium top deck again because it's going to take you a full turn before you get it. I think situationally it's going to win you games, and sometimes you're also going to get punished by that tempo hit you're going to take. So be aware, it's a very powerful effect, goes into your hand, probably finds you something that's going to let you win the game. I think a good comparison to this is what's the Kaldheim colorless one that lets you tap and sacrifice it to find an artifact?
You mean Kaladesh one?
Kaladesh, yeah. Inventor's Fair.
This is an Inventor's Fair. Inventor's Fair is busted.
I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting comparison when if you're playing a red-white deck, because why would you play this over Inventor's Fair?
Well, because an Inventor's Fair requires you to have 3 other artifacts in order to, doesn't it?
That's true. You're absolutely correct on that. But if you're playing like a red-white deck, you probably have a Mox and another, like, it's not that hard to hit it in that particular deck, but it's a colorless source. It's a little bit slower. You're probably going to be activating them at around the same turn, which is why I think of this as an interesting comparison. It's like, do you want this to enter play tapped and be a little clunky for the mana requirements in your tempo, or do you want an enters play untapped, but it's colorless and you might not reliably be able to activate it? I think that's an interesting comparison, specifically in the red-white equipment deck.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd play either because I think both of them might just be a little too awkward. Like, I think they have a similar amount of awkwardness for that. Just because, like, I don't know if in my equipment plus creature deck or just like my creature deck that I want this kind of effect that is like not always going to be available, and that the cost kind of means that I have to like that I'll stumble a bit, right?
Yeah, I'm just not sure those decks can afford to play these types of utility lands, right?
It's just looking at this one, like the effect is good, it's powerful, and like maybe that's enough to push it over because again, that's like for the red white one specifically, you want mana sinks, you'll take some mana sinks, you have the mana, but like the fact that it's a white land that comes into play tapped, so it only adds 1 color, ETB's tapped, and then needs double red, which is just like such an awkward cost.
Yeah.
I think you're just probably better not playing this in favor of just playing like a land.
Like a basic land, right? I think this is the sort of thing, though, that I think if you play it, you're not wrong, but it's not an auto-include.
Right. Yeah. Like if you get this to work,
It's going to be great.
It will, it's going to be phenomenal, but it's a little hard to get it to work. And then, but like the cost of including it is, it's there, but it's not massive, right? So it's kind of the card where it's, I think saying just play a basic's a great example because you're like, it's too complicated to work out. Just play a basic. Basic's consistent, right? It's consistent. Yeah.
Let's move on. Next up, Brettagard Stronghold. This is the green-white version of this. So enters play tapped, tap to add green, green, white, white, tap and sacrifice it. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. They gain vigilance and lifelink until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Wheeler, what do you think?
I like green-white counters. I think it's one of the best, if not, I don't want to call it the best because Abzan's probably the best now, but it's in the top combinations for the counters deck. And you have double white pipped cards and you've got some green cards. And so losing a green land and having access to double white is going to be reasonable. Like that's a thing. Like you can play this land tapped in this deck and not feel too bad because you are a green deck, right? You're going to play mana dorks, or you might have certain protective spells that you'll want to keep up but you might not use. And lifelink and vigilance is disgusting. That's so gross.
It's a way to make up for the tempo loss as well. Like if you fall behind a bit, you can catch back up in a big hurry.
Absolutely. Yeah, like vigilance plus lifelink is basically just negating so many attacks. It's and the counters are permanent.
All right. Next up, Faceless Haven. This is a snow land, tap to add colorless. And for snow, it becomes a 4/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types until end of turn and is still a land. Wheeler.
Well, I think this card's pretty good. Triple snow is a legitimate cost. Like this isn't as completely free as I think some people have really connected with it and made it out to be, but it's relatively free enough. And monocolor deck, great. 2-color deck, maybe, probably, depends on the 2 colors. 4 is a lot, and vigilance is kind of a new-ish thing that they've added on some of these creature lands, and god does it feel good. Like being able to animate this, and of course people won't attack, or people won't cast their bolt until you've already attacked. And then you still have the mana to maybe use a pump spell or anything like that.
How relevant is the changeling on this?
I mean, often it'll come up a lot. I don't think you play it and go like, yes, perfect, my changeling combo is now complete. Although, let me get back to you on that. But yeah, like you will, if you're playing mono white, you might have a lord that can help this out. If you're playing it in like, I don't know, I don't think goblins particularly wants this. Maybe it does. But merfolk, you could play this in merfolk, certainly. It'll come up. You'll be happy that it has that line of text.
All right, next up, Gates of Istvel. Enters tapped, taps for white, and then 2 white, blue, and sacrifice. Gain 2, draw 2. Jer.
Cloud Blazers never looked so good. Yeah, this card's great in blue-white control. It's all you've ever wanted. Actually, all you've ever wanted was this card, but it made blue mana, but we'll accept white mana.
All right.
Yep.
Let's group up all of the new dual lands together. Let's use Glacial Floodplain as an example here. So these are snow lands. They are fetchable because they have the land types inside of them. So seeing as how this one says plains and island, much like the Ravnica duels or the original duels, these the triomes, these are very important words to see in the type line there. And they enter the battlefield tapped. Collectively, what do we think of new fetchable duels, and how important is it that they're also snow?
Pretty good. I mean, I think that there are decks that'll want this kind of effect. Not every single deck, but the fetchability is kind of huge for the decks that it matters. Like Jared was talking about High Tide. And the fact that there's snow lands is kind of nice because, again, if you're in like a blue moonish deck, like, yeah, you'll take a new fetchable duel that isn't like a weird splash triome that also can help support, Scred or the Frostbite. And then Into the North. Like, if you need to Into the North, like if you're playing like Golgari or whatever, or blue-green, like turns, the fact that you can now Into the North for like a dual land
Scape Shift
is pretty great. Yeah, Scape Shift.
Especially the 4-color version. Like, getting your colors is so important in that deck.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
All right, so they have a little bit more application, you might think.
Yeah, I mean, you're still including a land that always comes into play tapped and doesn't provide utility in the sense of like the sack lands that we've been covering, but it provides certain flexibility early on.
Next up, Great Hall of Starnheim. Enters tapped, taps for black, and white, black, and sack. Create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. Activate only as a sorcery. Jer.
Notably, you also have to sack a creature you control, not just the land.
Oh, nice catch. Yeah, that is very notable.
But this card is still insane, and in a bunch of the white-black decks you play this in, that will in fact be an upside. Yeah, this is my pick for the strongest of the cycle. It's like we were talking about how a 4/4 with flying and haste is very good and underrated. 4/4 with flying and vigilance is also very good and underrated, and will kill your opponent very fast.
Turns out we've kind of loved Sarah Angel forever, eh?
Yeah. Can't be countered, too. That's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and as a sack outlet, like one-time sack outlet.
All right, next up, let's finish off the cycle here because the double-faced modal card dual lands also added a bunch more. For example, we have Hengegate Pathway here is the blue-white version. I don't know how much we have to say about this. They were good before. It's nice to see more of them.
Yep.
Any experience with these since we've had a little bit more time to play with them? I think they're fine.
I really like them. If anything, I've grown more fond of them, actually.
Lands that always come into play untapped are just good.
Yeah, I definitely thought they'd be more kind of like relegated to like maybe I'll play the enemy ones or like if I'm on a Hymn to Torak counterspell deck. But then I've just really liked them in basically every deck now that I'm thinking about it, except for like certain like combo-ish decks. But even then, like I'll still play the blue-black one. I've played a lot of the blue-black one.
So you're like 2-color, no-brainer, include in 3. Maybe on the line 4+, you probably want lands that tap for more than one color.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what your 3 colors are and what you're looking to do early. Because again, having the flexibility to be able to either thought seize on one and then or lightning bolt. You have to be wanting to do those things and get them under the wire when you need them, but also just like maybe you want to just sit back. You'll play your like a fetch on one, and then depending on what you find out your opponent's on or what you've drawn or how the game goes on, you get to choose, am I going to be playing this Hymn to Torak quicker, or should I keep up a counterspell or play out a creature double pipped?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to Immerstrom Skullcairn. What a mouthful. What a sentence. Enters tapped. Taps for black. 1 black, red. Sack the land, deal 3 damage to target player. That player discards a card. Activate only as a sorcery wheeler.
This one is a bit, I don't know. It's good. I believe it's good. It's just a bit of an awkward color combination, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because very often you don't see a lot of Rakdos proper that would want to play something like this. So I think when you look at this, you kind of just have to operate as though you are playing a third color. And if you're playing a third color, I don't know if I'm playing this in Grixis, and I don't believe I'm playing this in Mardu, but worth noting, it's pretty reasonable, much like a lot of other cards are, with Renin 6 or Life in the Loam or Ramanap Excavator. So if I'm playing like a Jund like land deck or a Jund like grindy-ish deck that has those cards, but not necessarily, a strip package or whatnot, I could foresee myself playing this kind of card in it.
It's a good home for that. All right. Litjara. I'm probably pronouncing this. Maybe it's Yara?
Yeah, Litjara.
Yeah.
Litjara Mirror Lake.
Or Litjara. It's Yara. I don't know the first part.
Enters play tapped. Taps for blue. 2 green, blue. Tap sack. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. Jer.
I really like this card. I've played like clone tribal deck before, and it was much better than I thought it was going to be.
All right.
And this definitely gets into that deck. It was a Bant deck for reference.
How do you cast your rats then?
I didn't, Ben. And anything that can make True Name Nemesis like another True Name Nemesis and also make it bigger is also just really obnoxious to play against. That's how I won most of my matches, honestly. I just like Eldritch Evolution True Name into play, usually with something that costs like more than True Name Nemesis. And then just started cloning them.
Turns out a good card is good. All right. Now, here's one a lot of people wanted to cover, so let's all talk about it. We got the Port of Karfell. Enters tapped. Taps for blue. 3 blue, black, tap, sack, mill 4, then return a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Notably, this one doesn't say activate only as a sorcery. This is instant speed reanimation here.
I don't understand how this one got past the sorcery clause.
Instant speed uncount. Well, I mean, it's such a feel bad when you have to use your whole turn, all your mana to reanimate a creature and have it not be countered,
Yeah, that's so horrible. There's so much counterplay for your opponent.
Can you imagine having your Wilderness Reclamation and this and go, oh, I guess I have to wait a couple of turns to use this and then untap with all my mana?
I mean, I can, because I'll definitely play it in Wilderness Reclamation.
Yep.
But
All right, so this card's just kind of broken and we can move on.
Well,
It's not broken, but it's very good.
I mean, it costs 7. Yeah.
but you get to 7. Like,
Especially in wilderness rec decks.
yeah, in a blue-black deck, blue-black X, even something like Reanimator, right? Like you will get to 7 sometimes, because turns out, if you've played Reanimator, you will find out that getting a big thing on turn 2, not actually as good as you'd think a lot of the times.
Here's a quick question. For an effect like the Port, are you playing land tutors in that sort of like dedicated reanimation deck, or is this just kind of a free, like a land that you're like, well, this is obviously just something I include now?
Just a free roll.
Yeah, I think you're just kind of, those decks typically already play tutors in general. I don't, but I wouldn't demonic tutor for this. I'd probably find a better card. But yeah, you'll just play it because, you'll play it.
I mean, part of the reason it's so good is because the opportunity cost of playing it is so low. And there's the classic adage of don't put bad cards in your deck to make your good cards better.
I think that's just good advice that people don't say enough.
This card is already good in the deck. You don't need to put a land tutor into a deck that like otherwise gets very little utility from a land tutor to make this card that is good in your deck like slightly better.
Don't put bad cards in your deck to make your good cards better. Wow. That's just so succinct. I mean, it's so simple when you say it that way, but I'm shook. I'm shook, Jer.
Serge looked over at his equipment deck. I look for my eggs.
Oh God,
deck.
I'm so guilty of this. You have no idea.
I mean, I should take my own advice, but
Yeah. We're all just like, wow.
No, they're not bad. They're synergy cards.
Yeah. Thanks, Wheeler. Thanks. Yeah. All right. Moving on, we have Skemfar Elder Har. Enters play taps for green. 2 black, green, tap sack. Up to 1 target creature you don't control. Gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Create 2 green elf warriors, but activate only as a sorcery. Wheeler.
I'm not exactly enthused to play this. I think it's one of the, less. I'm just going to call it bad. I think it's actively bad. Not actively bad, because again, it's green. Its inclusion cost is pretty low. But like, I guess it hits. It just doesn't do enough for me, and maybe that's greedy.
It's also black though. That's hard, right?
Yeah, but if you got green getting black.
I just wanted to kill something relevant. Like I want it to be like -4/-4. If it was -4/-4, then I'd be like, yeah, sure, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of, I can foresee in a deck that will play like Edicts or something, like using this to get their mana dork or like their Icefang Kotal off the board, and then you get 2 little idiots that you can then sack to like an Innocent Blood or something like that. Like I can foresee some amount of utility, but I just don't know if you need to.
Like that's a pretty niche case, right? Like just wrath them.
Just wrath, forehead. That's fair.
Just destroy all creatures. Yeah.
All right, well, here's another case then. Let's talk about Cirtlin Frostpyre. Enters taps for red. 2 blue, red, tap, sack, scry 2 inexplicably, and deal 2 damage to each creature. Activate only as a sorcery. Jer, what do you think about this one?
I'm more on board with this one, since the blue-red decks don't have access to destroy all creatures, and blue-red is traditionally better at like sort of going 1-for-1 and then getting ahead with card advantage, and this is another way to like clean up a bunch of small things, which is traditionally an effect that is very good in blue-red, but every time you like sort of don't really want to just put a Pyroclasm in your deck because it's dead in a certain number of matchups, and being able to put a Pyroclasm in your deck that's a land and also scries 2
and uncounterable,
is much more like easier to swallow.
So my worry with this card is sort of the premier blue-red deck in our format is Blue Moon, and this is notably a non-basic land. Like, is Blue Moon playing this? Is there a different blue-red deck that wants this land?
You're definitely playing this in Blue Moon. You just cut a mountain.
I think that you're likely to just play a mountain, or play this over a mountain rather, or just like, I don't know, from what I've seen, a lot of Blue Moon lists are also just cutting, like, back to basics. Maybe it kind of really mucks myself, and Magus of the Moon dies to shock, and turns out just casting Ancestral Recall a couple of times and having a pocket Blood Moon to throw down in a match is good enough. But so if this bites you, it bites you, but often it won't do so in a way that really stops you from being able to play through a match. And like like Jer said, the fact that it scries and you don't have to include an actual pyroclasm, which this one hits core Firewalker. Like core Firewalker and other pro red creatures against Blue Moon.
People laugh, but it's actually a serious problem.
They're true names. They're true names. Like that's what I played Firewalker and Jeskai for so long, like Jeskai mid-range. And Blue Moon was because of it. It's like, all right, if I get this down, you are not killing this, and you are not able to race me with Dark Dwellers and stuff. So it's nice to have. It's nice for them to have this kind of card available.
All right, next up, the World Tree is a land that enters play tapped. Taps are green. As long as you control 6 or more lands you control tap to add 1 of any color, inexplicably. And for Wooburg twice, white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, and tap and sacrifice the World Tree. Search your library for any number of God cards, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. This is quite the card. Is it good?
No.
I think, maybe good is a strong word, but I could see this popping up.
I could see playing it maybe for the second ability.
I was going to say, do you play this in a 5-color deck just as a way to fix all your lands?
There's got to be better ways. Like
I'm not playing it. I don't think I'm playing it in a 5-color deck. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe if I'm playing like a ramp deck that has 4 or more colors that can like just play this because I'll play it on turn 1. And turn 2, I'll just cast Rampant Growth, and I'll get to a point where I just want all the different mana. You can ignore the last line of text.
But then why are you playing it? There's like, is it really that good? Like if you're playing a 4-color ramp deck, like I have a lot of experience with 4-color ramp decks, and color fixing is rarely the problem.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like it's necessarily like I'm not saying that it's bad, but I could like it does enough that I think there will be deck lists that want to have access to this chromatic lantern with relatively low cost of playing, much akin to what these other lands have, and they'll be happy to have it. Like again, it's not asking a lot to play it.
Then you're going to have this weird moment where it's like turn 14, you have 30 lands, and you're asking myself, do I actually have any gods in this deck? There's going to... right?
Like, I knew I should have put Keranos back in.
Right? Like, where's my Scarab God? Why isn't my Scarab God in here? All right, let's talk about the last card we're going to talk about today. Speaking of gods, the Tyrite Sanctum. It's a land that taps out of colorless. 2 and tap. Target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then 4 and tap, sack the Sanctum, put an indestructible counter on target god. What does this card do? I mean, we know what it does, but does it have a home in our format?
Oh, yeah.
Go on.
Does it go in thick red or medium red?
Oh, why not both? Medium red, medium green, thick green, medium. I mean, Death and Tax is also mono white. I think it's. I think this card's again relatively low cost of inclusion in a deck that will already play some amount of utility lands that are colorless. If we're talking D&T especially, you're kind of a deck that will play a bunch of legendary cards, legendary creatures, and not care about Karakas because your stuff is already cheap enough, or you can kill their Karakas and you play your own Karakas to Karakas your stuff. So great. Mono green, I can foresee playing this too. Like, if you play legendary creatures, it just has pay 2 tap. Congratulations. It gets a counter. And you don't have to... Like, you could just keep doing that. You don't ever have to sacrifice it. It's just kind of like instant speed. Boop. There you go. Nice little counter on top. But I guess, you might come into have, you might play a deck that does have gods in it. Although most of them are already indestructible.
In the old ones, right?
Yeah, you don't need to double up on old Ronus. It's good enough by itself. But yeah, I kind of just like it as putting a counter on things. Instant speed. Getting your Isamaru to a 3/3. Getting Thalia to a 3/2.
Yeah, all right. That's pretty exciting. Well then, friends, that is going to do it for our episode today. Thank you very much for part 2. Look forward to part 3, where we finish off our set review of Kaldheim. Reminder, if there's any cards that you think we didn't talk about today that we should have, let us know in the comments down below. We quite enjoy going through there and seeing what your thoughts are. Want to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to Jer and Wheeler. Reminder that this podcast is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.